Hello there, everybody. Hello, and welcome to this German GCSE and iGCSE video tutorial. So in this specific tutorial, we are going to look at the reading exam and how to answer different German GCSE and iGCSE reading question types. This should be really useful as I'm going to take you through each of the most common question types that can occur and can come up in the reading paper for German GCSE or iGCSE across the main exam boards too. And I'm going to take you through step by step how I would answer every single one of those. So there should be lots of value in here, and yeah, should be very useful. So just to begin, I'm Dhananjay Talwar. I studied French and Italian for my MA degree at the University of Cambridge and graduated back in 2015. I have been an educator, mostly a full-time tutor ever since then. And languages in general is something that I'm hugely passionate about. In fact, I've learned over 20 of them to different levels myself, including at least 9 to fluency, one of which is, of course, German. I did German for my GCSE too, getting a top grade, and then practiced it considerably with friends afterwards. Yeah, and it's been a very rewarding journey as a tutor. In fact, I've managed to help over 500 students already to achieve or even exceed their target grade in language GCSE or iGCSE exams while I've been a full-time tutor. I've taught around 8 languages so far to GCSE or iGCSE level, and several of those at higher levels as well. And it's been, yeah, very enjoyable too. Okay, so before we delve into the material for this particular video, I'm just going to show you the German GCSE and iGCSE exam boards again. So as of September 2025, there are 4 of these for GCSE German, 2 for iGCSE German. The vast majority of students will be following one of these exam boards. And I do recommend getting to know, finding out which exam board you're studying as early as possible, ideally. The good thing is, though, that this video should be relevant for those of you studying any of these exam boards because we're looking at the most common question types that come up in the reading paper across these different exam boards. And I've given example questions, as you'll see, taken from the most common exam boards. There's one example for each of these different question types, and I'm going to go through each one of them in turn, and show you the necessary technique that you need to put in place to maximize your marks when answering each of these question types. These are the most common question types. It's not an exhaustive list of all the kinds of questions that could potentially come up in your reading exam, but it definitely covers by far the most common ones, and the ones that together collectively make up the majority of questions in the reading papers too. So these include gap fill questions, multiple choice type questions, questions which you have to answer true, false, or not mentioned, questions where you have to identify the correct statements, questions where you must answer in English, questions where you answer in German, and in brackets at the bottom there is translation. I've put that in brackets because that's not actually covered in this video. I do have a separate video which I highly recommend checking out, which is on translation in both directions, actually. So that video covers translation both from German to English and English to German. In the reading exam, in the reading paper, it would normally be translation from German into English, so the slightly easier one. But in this particular video, we're going to look at all of the other 6 question types one by one, and I'm going to take you through each of them in turn and give you the necessary techniques to answer each, so it should be very, very helpful. Okay, we're going to kick off with gap fill questions. So this is our first question type. And for every single one of these questions, I'm going to give you an example, explain exactly how I would go about answering that question type. So what would I do step by step? And then show you the answers for this particular example too. So this example comes from a Pearson Edexcel iGCSE paper for 2024. And you can see the text on the left-hand side here, of course. For gap fill questions, they're called gap fill questions because you've got to use certain words to fill in gaps. The words that you use come from the box, will be given in a box usually, such as this box here. So the options, the words that you could use are here from A to M. And below that, you'll always find a series of statements, which are these sentences here from A to F. And you obviously have to complete each of those sentences with the correct word taken from the box. I do have a very particular technique, specific technique for these kinds of questions, which can be very useful and is not necessarily what most students will do. And that involves using the grammar to narrow down your options first. This will work for most gap fill type questions, not necessarily for every single one of them that you come across, though. So what I would do if we look at example C here, the first thing I would do is, read through all of the options, make sure you understand what all of these words from A to M mean as clearly as possible. Then read through all of the sentences from A to F, and then potentially read through the whole text as well. But even before you read through the text, it is possible to use the grammar to narrow down the options considerably. If we look at C here, I'll show you what I mean. So C says, für Thomas spielen Videospiele eine something Rolle, meaning for Thomas, video games play a something role. We obviously have to fill in the gap in C, and without even looking at the text, just by having a look at these options, we can use that to considerably narrow down the options, narrow down the possible answers. Just using C as an example, we know that grammatically, based on using this German sentence, the only things that could fit grammatically would have to be adjectives, and they would have to agree with the noun Rolle, which is feminine and singular. Which means that out of all of these options, A to M, only two of those options actually fit that description. Only two of them are adjectives which are in the feminine singular form, and that is J, große, and L, kleine. So we know even before we've looked at the text, we've narrowed down the options to just two that could fit. And then, of course, you can read through the text and use the information in the text to help you decide which of those two is correct. But I highly recommend using the grammar to narrow down your options first. It really helps in identifying the correct answer, makes it much easier, and potentially a lot quicker as well. And that can work for quite a few different gap fill questions too. So just to reiterate, use the grammar to help you first. Then once you've narrowed down the options, you can often, for gap fill type questions, use the grammar to narrow down the options to just two or three that could potentially fit in each gap. And then you can use the text to decide which of those is actually the right answer. Also, watch out for trick questions and pay attention to the details. It's really common for them to try and trick you by leading you towards one answer, only to then contradict that answer later on. Other types of tricks are also very common in the reading paper, particularly as you get further on towards the end of the paper. So watch out for all those. So just to show you again, using the grammar, we can identify that the answer for C must be either J, große, or L, kleine. And then you can use the text to find out which of those is actually the correct answer. Okay, the second type of question is multiple choice questions. This example comes from a 2022 paper for AQA. You can see that, you're given a text, as with all of these questions. And as usual, the first thing will always be to read through the instructions and the text in full. I'd read through the text in full at least once, if not twice. For multiple choice questions, of course, they're multiple choice because you're given a choice of answers to choose from. Often, like it is here, that will be exactly three answers, but the number of options can vary, can be more or less than three. So as it says here, you've got to write the correct letter in the box. And of course, you can use the fact that you've got limited options to choose from to really help you. A very useful technique many students should use is called elimination. Elimination means basically eliminating, either mentally or you could even put a sign, just as a sign, as a reminder to yourself that you know that a particular option or a particular potential answer is incorrect. So even if you're not sure entirely what the correct answer is, you can eliminate or rule out answers you definitely know are wrong. And that can really help you to get closer to the right answer. Other than that, you do have to be careful not to write down the first answer that you see. That is very important because they will often try and trick you. For example, for these questions, we have three options. for every question, they will often mention every single one of those options in order to try and mislead or trick the students. And many students will fall into that trap of just writing down the first of those answers that they come across in the text. So make sure you don't do that. And do read the question and all of the answer options very carefully too. I would actually do that, first. Make sure that you understand all of the options, what they mean, and what you're looking out for then when you read through the text. That will really help too. So this says, if we look at the first question here, 6.1 says, in Rostock, this type of extreme sport, A, began 20 years ago, B, is more popular than in other areas of Germany, and C, will be taking place for the first time. So after reading through the question and the answer options and checking the number of marks available, which can be a useful guide too, I would go to the text. And the answer for this particular question is given in the first paragraph. It says, next Sunday, the city of Rostock will celebrate for the first time an extreme sports event, which is or has already been popular for 20 years in many other regions of Germany. So that information actually tells us a few things. Of course, it reveals the correct answer. If you're able to read it or translate it correctly, you would realize that the answer is, of course, C. This type of extreme sport will be taking place for the first time in Rostock. But it also tells us that this kind of event has already been popular in other areas of Germany for 20 years at least, which means that we could even mentally eliminate answer B. We know that answer B is not possibly correct at all. And we know that it also cannot be A, because this kind of extreme sport event did not begin 20 years ago in Rostock, although it did begin 20 years ago in other parts of Germany. So A and B could be eliminated. That can also help you to get closer to the right answer. And the information in the first paragraph tells us that the answer is C. So those are my top tips. Those are the techniques to implement for multiple choice questions. And that is the answer for the particular example that we saw. Okay, the next kind of question is true, false, or not mentioned questions. This example comes from AQA, again, from their 2023 reading paper. So you can see the instructions written out at the top again. This article's on online dating. And you can see that, you'll be given a text, as with each of these question types. Read through the text fully at least once, perhaps even twice if you've got the time in the exam. And then you'll be given a series of statements. And for every single one of those statements, you'd have to identify whether it is true, false, or not mentioned in the text at all. So that's how these particular questions work. You do have to read through the statements carefully. As soon as you finish reading through the text, I would make sure that you understand what every single one of those sentences or the statements below mean as clearly as possible. Of course, when they're given in English, like they are here, that's considerably easier. And then it largely comes down to locating the right part of the text, if the answer is even there in the text, and then paying attention to the details as well. Again, it's quite common to come across trick questions too, where they try and purposefully mislead students. So if we look again at the first one here, it says, it is easy to describe yourself accurately online. Once you've read over that statement, you then go back to the text, which hopefully you would have already read at least once, and try and find where any proof is that that is true or false. In fact, that is found in the first paragraph here, where it says, in real life, it is easier for people to see, what kind of a person somebody is. But in online dating, it is more difficult because there are only photos and a few details in order to explain who somebody is. So that information in the first paragraph reveals that the answer is definitely F for false. It's actually more difficult to describe yourself accurately online. So that's how to go about these questions. Make sure to be quite careful, because a few of these answers are likely to be actually not in the text. Okay, so that's just to show you the answer that we found. Now on to questions where you've got to identify the correct statements. This example comes from the sample material for Pearson Edexcel GCSE, who've very recently somewhat changed their format and syllabus for language GCSE papers. So this question is on social media. Again, as always, read through the instructions first and then the text. This is a very mini text by most standards. Then for identifying the correct statements questions, what will happen is you'll be given a series of statements. Here the statements are these ones from A to F, and you'll have to put a cross next to a certain number of those statements which are correct, as per the information given in the text above. So, of course, read the instructions very carefully, read through the text itself once or even twice. If it's this small, then you should definitely be able to read the text twice, most likely. Then make sure that you understand what every single statement is saying very clearly. Again, much easier if they're in English. And make sure to pay attention to how many statements you must identify as correct, because that, of course, can change. Here it's 3 of them, but it could be more than that or potentially even less too. So do pay attention to exactly how many statements you've got to tick or put a cross next to identify as correct. Okay, make sure to read the text fully first. Then you can use elimination to rule out wrong answers. Elimination actually works very well for any kind of question type where there's a limited number of options to choose from. Watch out for trick questions. Make sure that you pay attention to details as well. As always, trick questions are fairly common in the reading and listening papers. So if you look through this text, you'll be able to identify what the answers are. Just to give you an example of how elimination can work as well and how useful it can be, if we look at sentence A, that says, Ben used social media when he was younger. However, it says right near the start, als ich jünger war, habe ich nie soziale Medien genutzt, which means when I was younger, I never used social media. So that actually tells us that he never used social media when he was younger, and therefore sentence A must be wrong. So you can either mentally or by putting an X somewhere here, make sure that it's clear to the examiner that you're not indicating that that's the correct answer at all. You can indicate to yourself that that answer is actually eliminated or ruled out. And that can narrow down your options and make it easier to identify the 3 correct statements instead. So don't hesitate to use that technique. The answers for this particular example, based on the information in the text, are actually B, D, and E. Okay, moving on to questions where you've got to answer in English. Again, this comes from the sample material for Pearson Edexcel GCSE. Again, the questions instructions should be written out clearly, and then you'd have a text to read as well. So make sure to read through the text fully at least once. And questions where you've got to answer in English, of course, require you to answer reading comprehension questions on that text in English. So the language you've got to use when answering the questions should be very clear. It should be stated very clearly in the instructions, as it says here. Answer the following questions in English. You don't need to write in full sentences, which is also worth noting. You generally do not need to write in full sentences at all when answering in English or in German. However, if you are in any doubt as to which language you've got to answer in, then you can just follow the rule that you answer in the same language that the question itself is written in. So if the questions are written in English, you answer in English. If the questions are in German, you'd answer in German, and so on. So for these kinds of questions, as when you've got to answer in German, try and use the text to help you as much as possible. It largely comes down to identifying where in the text the answer actually lies. And then if you're answering in English, all you have to do is simply translate the correct part or the appropriate part of the text. You don't need to translate more than that, only the bit which gives you the information required by the question. Make sure to answer every part of the question too. You can use the number of marks available for that question as a really useful guide as well. If the question's worth 2 marks, you normally have to give 2 details. and so on. So if we look at question 1, part 1 here, what kind of skills does Layla want? You'll find the answer in the first paragraph. Ich hatte gute Noten in der Oberstufe, aber ich möchte lieber berufliche Fähigkeiten sammeln. So the answer is here. I would prefer to acquire, to get professional skills. So it largely comes down to identifying where the answer is in the text. Once you've identified that, which is at the end of the first sentence, here you just have to translate the appropriate part. In fact, in this case, it's just these two words, berufliche Fähigkeiten, professional skills. And that's what you'd then give as the answer. These are the answers for this particular example. Okay, and now moving on to our final question type, which is where you've got to answer in German. This example comes from a Cambridge iGCSE paper from 2024. So these are very similar in nature to questions where you've got to answer in English, but surprise, surprise, you've got to answer in German instead. And of course, the questions themselves should be written in German then too, as they are here. So you'll be given the instructions. Often the instructions would be in German as well. So make sure that you practice that and you're familiar with the different instructions that can come up in German. Here it says, read the text, answer the following questions in German. This is the text, which is somewhat more substantial. And this is just the first question here, which is A. There would be many further questions below that as well. So, as with all of these, you would read the instructions and then read through the text carefully first. I wouldn't be tempted to look at the questions first. I'd go through the text fully first, then read through the questions, and then go back to the actual text. Make sure to read each question carefully. They may be slightly harder to understand, of course, if they're written in German. And make sure to check the number of marks available because they guide you as to how much you've got to write or how many points to give to make as well. So the trick again here, especially when answering in German, is to lift directly from the text as much as possible. The answer is often directly in the text. Sometimes you may well have to change the person that it's written in. If the text itself is written in the first person, the I form, which will often be the case. Obviously, when you're giving the answer in German, you should not write, I did this or I did that. You would have to change it to the third person. He or she did this or that, and so on. So be careful to do that if needed. And you may have to change, say, verb forms accordingly as well. So do make sure to make the necessary changes, but definitely use the text to help you as much as possible. And last of all, check through your grammar. To make sure that there's no mistakes there. German grammar can definitely be tricky. And that's why I really recommend using the text to help you as much as you possibly can. For this particular question, A, wie lange sollte ein Hilfsprojekt dauern? How long should a help project, a volunteering project take? That answer is actually found in the second line here. Sie fragte, was man in 72 Stunden für andere Menschen tun könnte und bekam viele Vorschläge. They asked what one could do for other people in 72 hours. And they got many suggestions. So that tells us that each one of these projects should take exactly 72 hours. 72 Stunden. And in fact, in this particular case, you don't have to change anything. You can just copy the appropriate part of the text, which is here, 72 hours. So you can copy directly from the text without even changing anything in this case. Okay, so that is the answer, just to illustrate it again. Now I'm going to take you through a brief quiz to check your understanding of these different German GCSE and iGCSE reading question types and check how much you've taken in. So, first of all, how many times can you read over the same text in the reading exam? This is quite different to the listening in nature. Have a think over this. Okay, I'm going to reveal the answer then. This is actually as many times as you want within the time limit. There's no specific limit as to how many times you can go back over previous questions or the same text. The limit really is the time available. And of course, you should aim definitely to finish the whole paper, to answer all the questions and the translation, if there is one too, within the time limit. Make sure that you give yourself enough time to check as well, at least 5 minutes for that. Question 2, true or false? Eliminating wrong answers can be a useful tactic for any multiple choice questions. That is definitely something I did mention. I'll give you a few seconds nonetheless to have a think. Okay, and now I'll show the answer. This one is true. That can certainly be a very useful tactic whenever you've got a limited number of options to choose between. Question 3, true or false again, the reading exam will often contain trick questions. Okay, I'm going to show you the answer for this one too. This is true too. So you've got to be careful not to select the first answer that you read as correct, and to check the details. So yeah, make sure you don't tick the first option that you come across within the text. For reading and listening, in fact, trick questions are very common. They will often, in some way, lead the students towards one answer, only to contradict that answer later on, or to give further information, which indicates another answer is more suitable instead. So make sure that you don't fall for those. Exam technique is really important for GCSE language exams, and that's why we're going over it in detail here. It's not just about knowing the language well in order to score marks. Lastly, number 4, how could you use the original text to help you when answering in English or in German? We looked at this right towards the end. So hopefully you've retained that information. Okay, I am actually going to reveal the answer. So first, you should locate where the correct answer is in the text. Then you'd either translate it into English or just copy out the relevant part in German and make any necessary changes if you have to. Such as changing the person that it's written in, and include only the required details. I wouldn't include any additional details at all. So try and use the original text actually as much as you can if answering in English or German. Okay, if you've got questions about anything here, or if you'd like to know about more personalized help, which I do provide too, you can contact me by email, through Facebook or Instagram. And I post on social media platforms every day, actually, showing my love of languages to the world, encouraging hopefully more and more people to learn languages, and making sure they know the benefits of doing so, and efficient and useful methods as well, which are also a lot of fun. And I do post even about GCSE and iGCSE language exams as well, including revision techniques, how to go into the exam feeling as confident as possible. So don't hesitate to follow me on those platforms. I have many resources, including free ones available for GCSE and iGCSE languages, which includes German. And I do one-to-one lessons, group classes, courses, and more. So don't hesitate to reach out at all if you'd like to find out more about any of that.